And when the news first leaked that Comcast was in talks to buy a majority stake in NBC Universal, shares of Comcast plunged.
That was back on September 30th, but when the deal was announced on December 3rd, shares spiked. They are up 15% since that date. So what do investors see now that they didn't see before? Analyst Chris Marangi of Gabelli Co sees some hidden gems in the deal. He joins us in studio along with Bloomberg's Greg Miles, who covers the media sector. Gentlemen, Greg, good to see you. Chris, very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on Bloomberg. Let's take a look at the hidden gems that we were talking about that you found in that Comcast NBCU deal. And for starters, does this mean that CEO Brian Roberts got a dramatically better deal than most investors thought?
I think he did. And I think there's at least three elements to that. One, it's a better structure than anticipated, and we could talk about that. Two, a better price with $1.5 billion of tax benefits. Three, it's a better asset than we thought. $2.2 billion of the $2.8 billion of NBC EBITDA is actually from the cable networks business, which is a terrific business. And fourth is the comment that Brian Roberts made, that Comcast is strategically complete.
And the key here is, you pointed out, that if the value of NBCU rises over the next few years, Brian Roberts can buy GE's remaining 49% stake at a huge discount, saving billions of dollars. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me.
He set himself up to get a wholesale price on the rest of NBC. In terms of the structure, this is going to be two reservoirs of cash flow. You've got the cable company, the distribution company, which is basically going to be untouched and will continue to buy back stock and pay the dividend, about $13 billion of EBITDA. And then the content company, which is going to have about $3 billion of EBITDA, and that will essentially fund the redemption of GE's interest over time.
So does all this mean GE's Jeff Immelt gave away the store to Brian Roberts?
Listen, GE has other priorities. They're investing in infrastructure around the world. And they probably got a better deal from Comcast than they probably could have gotten from someone else.
When we talk about hidden gems, why were they hidden? What did you see that other folks did not?
Well, the world sees it now, which explains the rise of the stock. But the GE is obviously a big company. There wasn't necessarily a lot of visibility into NBCU, for one thing, and for another, basically the guys at Comcast negotiated a terrific deal.
You know, one thing that strikes me again in your report is it points out that you found that 80% of the so-called EBITDA, or cash flow, or earnings, however you calculate that, comes from the cable businesses, dramatically higher than anybody anticipated on Wall Street, meaning that this asset is a lot better, a lot healthier than anybody anticipated.
Yeah, you know, the purchase price comes out around 10 times EBITDA, which, when you consider that 80% of the cash flows from the cable networks, is a pretty good price. The travel channel was just bought by Scripps for 12 times EBITDA. So you're basically paying very little for the film business, the broadcast business, and the parks business.
So this all sounds rosy and very bullish. What could knock your forecast out the water?
Well, obviously everyone is concerned with the regulatory impact. And clearly everyone in Washington, competitors of Comcast, whether they be other distributors or programmers, are looking at this deal closely. There's going to be a lot of noise. Ultimately, I think it gets done. But the government's going to put some constraints on exactly what Comcast can do.
Such as?
They're probably going to have to live with the restrictions that News Corp lived with when they bought DirecTV. Certain things they have to abide by when they negotiate with programmers. Perhaps some limits on what they can buy in the future. Remains to be seen.
And how about if the network NBC's profits and revenues fall even more dramatically than the worst case for next year? That's kind of a limit on the future for
absolutely.
this deal too.
There's obviously some operating issues. It's all about execution at the end of the day. We think that these assets together are better than they are apart.
All right, let's move on and talk about News Corp Time Warner cable talks quickly. News Corp demanding for the first time that Time Warner Cable pay cash for content. What's the story here, Fox Network? Cash for content of Fox Network.
Right. So if you remember, about a year ago this time, there were advertisements of Dora crying because the Viacom network's going to get pulled for Time Warner. I don't think you're going to see Jack Bauer crying today. But the broadcast networks have a problem. It's an ad-driven business. The ad pie is shrinking and shifting from broadcast to the cable networks. The broadcast networks need to find other sources of revenue, so they're basically copying the cable networks and going for monthly recurring revenue.
So we're talking higher cable bills here?
What does this mean for us here?
Well, some of the increased cost is going to be borne by the cable companies. Some of it's going to be borne by other networks, which are going to see their fees cut. Ultimately, however, much of it's going to be borne by the consumer.
Yeah, but how much is it going to cost me to watch American Idol? How much is it? I want to know.
The speculation is that the ask from News is something like $1. Many other networks are getting payments of about 25 cents. They probably end up somewhere in the middle. But you're not going to pay an extra $1 a month.